Muy buenos días. Vamos entrando.
Good morning. We are starting. Welcome everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, to this webinar. What is climate change and why is it important for our cities? This is our first webinar for the climate action series in Latin America and Caribbean cities. I'm Maria Camila Uribe, coordinator of the network, and I am pleased to open this space for the exchange of information on the challenges and opportunities for climate actions in the region cities. Before we begin, I would like to tell you once again that this webinar you can hear in whichever language you prefer, whether Spanish, Portuguese, or English. If you go down in Zoom to choose the simultaneous interpretation, you have the three options. Also, if you have any questions for our panelists, you can add them at the Q&A section, at the tab of the Q&A tab, so that you can calmly send your questions and not interrupt. Besides the recording, this presentation will be available in the bank YouTube channel starting next week. Also, you can find the link to our channel here in the chat, which we just shared. To anyone who's just joining, the Bank City Network is a regional cooperation network that aims to facilitate the exchange of knowledge, solutions, and good practices among cities in Latin America and the Caribbean. Due to the multi-sectorial nature of the X sector, it creates opportunity for dialogue among the divisions of the bank and the public, private, and academic sectors in all the cities. We also seize the knowledge of the different sectors and specialists that work at the bank, and thus contribute to leadership in urban to strengthen leadership in urban management and promote the construction of capacity building for municipal workers. At the chat, you can find the link to the network. Before we begin, before starting with the program itself, I'd like to say that this is the first webinar of the Climate Action series that we are going to cover today. The second and third will be held next Wednesday, the 27th, and the last one on October 4th. And then we will cover the challenges of planning and implementation of climate action in the cities. Likewise, this year we are carrying out 4 series of webinars, as you can see here, of food security, as you can see, starting in June, the transport-oriented development, which started in August, and the health and city series, which will begin in October. To further participate, please remember to enroll, and you can find the link in the chat that we have in this session, and you can find the previous sessions recordings for any webinar that you may be interested in, also in the link, and as well as in the IADB's blog. To complement this series of webinars, we invite you to download the Climate Action and Paris Agreement, the role of Latin America and the Caribbean document that aims to help subnational stakeholders to understand climate change issues and how to tackle them. This publication is available in Spanish, English, and Portuguese, and it can also be downloaded at the link we just placed in the chat. Did you know that Latin American and Caribbean cities face numerous challenges regarding climate change, like floods, storms, droughts, and heat waves, have the potential to significantly affect society's functioning? When cities are planned and managed adequately, they can offer solutions to tackle climate change and to lead with citizens to build far more sustainable cities. During our session today on climate change and why it is important for cities, we will discuss how to identify climate challenges in cities and how to plan actions to face them. Further, We will see the challenges and opportunities that the Recife and Mexico City have found, as well as how they have tackled the planning for climate action in cities in Chile. For this, to tackle this, we structure the session in two different spaces. First, we have presentations, and then we will have a talk. Today, we are joined by Carolina Piedrafita, a senior specialist of the Housing and Urban Development Division of the bank, who will be our moderator. Welcome, Carolina. In the presentations, we have Beatriz Carneiro Meneses Silva, who is Executive Secretary of Resource Collection of the Recife Municipality in Brazil. Welcome. Oscar Vasquez, the Climate Change Director of the Secretary of the Environment of the Government of Mexico City. And then we'll have Andres Pica, who is project leader for Latin America at Sustainable Solutions Group. He has worked in building a guide for action for climate action with national and municipal governments in Chile. Welcome, Andres. Then, during the talk, we will cover the key subjects regarding how climate change has affected the region's cities and what challenges and opportunities they have found to tackle climate action at the local level. Here, we will have from the ministry, the head of the division of climate change of the Ministry for the Environment of Chile, Ms. Jenny Maher Santos. Welcome, Jenny. We also have the general coordinator and senior researcher of the International Institute for the Environment and Development, IIED, for Latin America, Ms. Jorgelina Jardoy. Be very welcome, Jorgelina. Thank you all for joining us.
Y antes de empezar y darle la palabra a
And before we begin, and before handing the floor to Carolina to begin moderating, I would like to ask you quickly to go to Mentimeter so you can tell us to which sector you belong, if you are the public sector, both at the local or national level, or the private sector, which is this is very important for us and for panelists and for the people who will be sharing in this talk with us today, so we can fully understand the work and for it to be useful for you as participants. So very quickly, I would like, you have the link in the chat if you need it, so you can enter this to tell us to which sector you belong to. So we have a clear idea. We have the private sector leading, as well as the academy and public sector, as usual. National public service sector. Now, very quickly, we are going to the two questions that we have. Which city do you live in? Whoever can enter the link, you can put which cities you are connecting from.
La pueden seguir completando.
You can continue filling it in, even if we can't see it. So now we are moving to the first question for this conversation. And we would like to hear from you. What are the main impacts of climate change that you have observed in your city? Here you have increase of the sea level, high extreme temperatures or heat waves, intense storms, including hurricanes, floods, droughts, change in the median temperature, change in median annual rainfall, loss of biodiversity and ecosystem degradation. You can see all of them there.
Temperatura alta parece
ser. Temperature seems to be the most noticeable, affecting cities, droughts, floods. Having done this, and with this background, I think I see that your answers are very important, and we're going to discuss how to face some of the challenges that you mentioned here. Without further ado, I leave you with Miss Carolina Piedrafita, part of the housing area of the bank, who will be moderating us today. Thank you, Carolina, for being here. Thank you, Maria Camila. You already presented me. It's a pleasure to me to be your moderator. I would like to thank you all, to thank the over 500 participants who are logging in, as well as our three panelists and presentators, who, due to the importance of this challenge facing cities, are going to tell us their experiences of how to plan, on the one hand planning, and on the other hand acting to mitigate and adapt to climate change and its effects. As we saw in the Mentimeter, affects us all in very harsh ways. Thank you all to our participants. As Maria Camila said, will have a Q&A session at the end. So we are going to start with the panelists. And then we will have a space for any questions that you have in the chat. Without further ado, I want to give the floor to Ms. Beatriz Carneiro. She is the Secretary for Resource Collection of the Recife Municipality in Brazil, and she's going to tell us a very interesting case of Promora. Good morning, everyone. Today, I'm going to talk to you, as Carolina said. I am a civil engineer and the secretary of the resource collection area of the Mayor's Office of Recife. We're going to talk about urban resilience in our cities. First, I'm going to tell you where Recife is. Recife is in the northeast of Brazil. It's totally surrounded by the Atlantic Ocean with beautiful beaches, and we are actually known as the Brazilian Venice. We have over 7 basins reaching the city with many rivers near the coast. It is a very pretty city, but also it is a developing city. It is the capital of the Pernambuco department, and the city has not grown evenly. We have slum and more wealthy areas, as well as informal communities. We have these issues. Recife is this area that I am showing you here, that is surrounded by lakes, by moors. Starting in 2014, the mayor's office has been working to fully understand how we can face those issues that are affecting the most vulnerable areas of the citizenship, regarding the structure and family formation, access to public services, because these people are the most affected by environmental issues. In our study in the organization territorial, the land organization study, we saw that, and Recife will be the first. Recife would be the first city to disappear should the sea level rises, and is the most sensitive to climate change. So this proof of urban resilience is a guarantee for the survival, considering what I just told you. We need to fully understand how we can face this challenge as a society. This is a very large capital city, and the mayor's office is working on this. And we mapped 545 social interest communities, of which 146 became priority regarding infrastructure and service access. In May 2022, a study was prepared analyzing different factors to perform the urban replanning for the social interest communities in Recife, so as to prevent flooding or the impact of flooding. And we started talking to the IADB in August 2021. We had a project almost ready, but then in May 2022, there was a rainfall event, the east waves, as we call it, which presented heavy rainfall, which raised the millimeter volume to 166 millimeter a day, the biggest rainfall in 70 years. And now we have had another rainfall that was greater than that. So we have in a very short time, the city was completely flooded due to rainfall and the flooding of terrain, including plantations, and over 100 and more than 50,000 houses were impacted and left 3,500 people without a home. And the number of people who had their houses flooded was we saw that 50% of Recife was below water. These are the pictures, so you can have an idea of how the tragedy impacted the city. The entire world spoke about this, that no city in the world would be ready to receive this amount of rainfall. But we were already acting to reduce those impacts. And from then, Promorar came up. This is a program for preparation alongside the bank, and we created it, and we set up a component for resilient structures. And it also related to flooding protection. We created a great package of infrastructure works to face the macro issue at Recife. This is how Promorar came about, and the bank was a great ally. And then in May was the first rainfall, and a few days later, the bank sent a mission from all over the world to support us before opening the program. The contract was signed on May 15 this year. After the beginning of the preparation, it took a little more over a year after the events. And the program, with from 70 to 75 million dollars for the program, which is equivalent to 100,000 Brazilian reals by the bank. This is the biggest investment program in the history of Recife and in the northwest of Brazil itself. It is one of the largest urban management programs ever.
Estabilidade da população. Eu sempre digo que o nosso objetivo primordial é salvar vidas. Salvar vidas, seja impedindo o deslizamento de terra, seja impedindo as
It's to
inundações.
save lives, either because of the floodings, because you know that floodings create a lot of killings, and also because of what the burden that this may be for the healthcare system, and also the problems regarding infrastructure and also access to urban services. And we also work in the reduction of the impacts, because it's always going to rain, but what's the impact that we need to avoid in the cities? And we work with the city halls to work in development and also to reduce climatic risks. Okay, the pillars of the programs have also been innovation, and it's to implement a very ancient program with the lessons learned from other programs that we've done here in the city, and including the innovation so that we can solve this topic of the floodings. Okay, the problem is divided in three components. We have the comprehensive urbanizations, a second of component, and also three componented, which is the strengthening innovation in urban policies and also in risk management in the component one. What are we gonna do? Well, because I always think that we can do everything and at the same time. But okay, basically we need to work for the drainage of the work in the creation of spaces and to improve the households, which I think it's so important in Brazil. Most of the programs go up to the front door of the house or inside the house. Inside the house, there are not many programs. And Promonar was able to do all the adaptations and to be able to pick up all the wastewater of all the houses. And not only do we need to get there, we also needed to ensure that these people are the legal owners of those households. We needed to generate, why can't we get to the community, including the cost of land and of rentals without allowing for if the population doesn't get a better employment or it's able to get a job and in training, in curriculum assessment, and also to work with families that live in risk areas. And this is a very important point. It was a change in perspective in Recife because many of the states, everything's happened in settlements, and the families leave because there is something it's going to be done, for example, an aqueduct or a road. That's why we need to re-accept people to take them from the place where they are so that we can do the works. But in Promorar, one of the goals is to be able to move the people to avoid the water to get to their houses. But I think that to ensure that not a single drop of water gets into these conditions, we needed to change them. And that's why some people that live inside the rivers will have to leave. And this is not a negative impact. And considering that these are collective programs, we need to provide resettlement solutions and solutions that cover the whole group of situations. And that's why we needed to create new solutions to be able to achieve the stability. And we have some very brief criteria because we need to work in 40 communities. It was hard to select them, and that's why we preferred it to be as objective as possible. And what did we needed to assess the planning of the to work on cleaning here in Brazil. And also we need to work in cleaning. This is done, and this is responsibility of a private public partnership. In our case, it's what they, and therefore who is responsible to do this. These are the companies, and we needed it to include the planning of the decisions made for the treatment of wastewaters in the community. We need a more we need to have areas with a higher area of floodings that were more affected by rain last year, and a higher, and they would also have high rates of crimes of violence in the areas with a higher risk of flooding. That's why we have some points that get flooded as soon as it rains, and you can imagine what happened with the increase of the water level when there are tides, which is a huge problem in Recife. And the second,
Ok. Nós somos uma cidade completamente cortada por rios, como eu
okay, we are totally surrounded by rivers, and in totally urban environments that throughout the years they were extending because of urban development. That's why we need to face this. And there were many studies to include the implementation of taking advantage of and we are reviewing this study because the truth is that we found that but only by this we were not able to achieve the status that we wanted, both in the update of the study as in the assessment of the works to be able to work in the basin to verify the areas with a high risk of for slidings. We did those contention. We worked to be able to use those spaces as a public space. Here we have something that it's already ready. It transformed the space completely. And as you can see, we have the monitoring for climate risks. We don't have a network. That's why we need to create, and we needed to improve the monitoring, both in the coastline protections as well as in flooding, and as well in housing within the development of an automatized urban control system. And with this platform, we can use these systems within these 40 communities. And to be able to do this, we had to check out our participatory methodology. We did some visits in the community 13 with Colombian specialties, specialists, so that they help us, so that they put the people at the center of everything. That's why we change the principles, and now we showed them the project. Now we do the project with them. After that, we did several workshops with the population so that the people are trained and people can validate what's going to be done. This is an example to see how how everybody's happy with this, and that's why through Pro Morar we have the possibility to transform communities and to transform them in places that are worth living. This is I don't know if people know the Moravia neighborhood in Medellin. This is a community that has very low community. It has very low income, but everybody has access to all different types of utilities. Then we have Morros over here, and this is the Rua Marilac, where we transformed the space into an aquarium with the participation of the community. And just to close off, we can see that the impact we were able to remove families from risk areas and from sliding areas. We were able to reduce to 50% the floodings. We were able to reduce the point of risks and more than and lots of lessons learned that we can share with you. So because we need participation, we need belonging, we need resilience, and it's very important for everybody to participate, for everybody to have a space in the way that it's convenient for them, and also in what that's why we needed to train the companies so that they project with social urbanism, because some of the companies are not used to it. In point 4, in point 4, we did a mapping for the drainage, and we always need to use this technique with some repairs of the physical structure, that we needed to have a hybrid solution to be able to generate the more cost benefit of these works, and to do small things that can be more feasible instead of doing big buildings as we see in other parts of the world, and the production of new household dwellings. They don't work by themselves. We also need we need to create new resettlement possibilities. And now with IDB, it's going to participate in assisted buying and also resettlement to some nearby places. Here we have some pictures of in areas and more. Here we can see funding possibilities, and here we can see how we can work in macro drainage. We need to work in the, we need to be more resilient, because when we work in contention, and sometimes the problem goes from the top of the to bottom with micro drainage, and we need to work in, we need also to work in early warning systems. We need to work in protection. We've done this with, especially it's all around the world. And so if you wanted to know a bit more about this program, we have the webpage with all the documents that are available. And at the same time, we also have a section where you can may talk with us, and you can have access to all the information, and so that you can see what are the, how we can receive comments from all the most affected population groups. Okay, Beatriz, congrats. Congrats. We knew don't of the 15 minutes, it's not enough to be able to, from what you were telling. I want to highlight the focus, the focus of about the importance of thinking about the most vulnerable population regarding this challenge, and also the creativity that has to be applied, because it's more expensive to adapt the infrastructure in these settlements that have a unique morphology that we need to combine based natural based solutions with great solutions, or more classic solutions that we need to foresee additional expenses to the ones that are considered appropriate, because the threat is even higher. And also, I would also like to highlight what you talked about at the resettlements, that we need to think that some places that were resettable in the past are no longer going to be because of the climate change. That's why I think that being able to take this and that this is and okay, thank you. And now I'm going to give the word to Oscar Vasquez, who is the director of climate change of Ciudad de Mexico. Oscar is going to tell us very briefly about what are the main challenges that his city faces, and how are they going to finance this, and also they're going to tell us about the solutions that are going to be implemented. Okay, Oscar, thank you so much. Okay, hi everybody. Okay, it's amazing how everybody is covering the challenges. And Mexico, as you well know, Mexico, it's a big city. You know that we can say that the territory of Mexico City has 9.2 million inhabitants, and the metropolitan areas has 21 million inhabitants each day. In the capital city of the country with 9.2 million inhabitants, we have 4.2 million people arrive to the city. It's to say that every day in working hours, our population increases 50%, with the challenges that it may be for water, for waste management, and all kinds of services. And it's within this context that we have had to face the challenges of climate change, because on one side, the impacts that are clear, that in the case of Mexico City, they consist in variations, in increases in temperature, and very strong variations in rainfall. And this is something that affects the city, not only for what happens in Mexico City, but a third part of the water that we use comes from outside the basins. It's pumped from very remote places, 120, 100 kilometers, 90 kilometers a distance. That's why we're worried, not only about what happens inside the city of Mexico, but what happens outside Mexico. And there are challenges, of course, that need to be taken care of. For example, let's talk about the food supply of 20 million inhabitants, because we are connecting the metropolitan area. And the variations in climate that happen 500 kilometers away have an impact in the price and the availability of food, and also a bad harvest, for example, in of corn or of wheat or of fruits or on vegetables may affect Mexico City, although it has happened in remote areas. That's why in this reality, we've had to apply what's happening inside the city. And okay, a city that has to transport millions of passengers inside and outside of the city, they needed to face mobilization challenges. That's why we have different kinds of tools. We have a program, we have an environmental and climate change program that has a land that has established very fast actions. Right now, I'm going to mention a couple of them. But besides this document for rapid reactions, we also have the climatic actions that up to 2030, where we have considered actions that go beyond the current management of the city. And now we have the local strategy and with a horizon for 2050, where the city of Mexico has been wants to be zero net emissions by the year 2050, which is a huge challenge. And of course, this is something that can be possible. It's possible thanks to an institutional structure that starts off from the national laws, like the national law for climate change. But within the city, we also have a local local climate law, which was before the national law, that gives us this legal framework that allows us to act. We also have an interinstitutional commission for climate change that it's presided by the mayor of the city, and where all the secretariats, all the ministers of the city wait, and also all the directors of the main institutions of the climate board decisions are made, and when we approve the climate action. That's why, as of all this, we've been able to move forward in different topics. And I am going to mention a couple. And as in Ciudad Solar, we have had the warming in more than 13 hospitals with warming, and in the next months we are going to have a photovoltaic plant that has been announced, and it's the biggest one that's been inside a city. And we have been able to build the supply, which is the biggest market, and I think that it's one of the biggest ones in the world. So that you can see, this is a market where the ones that sell food, more or less 300,000 people go every day. We also have a zero garbage program where we've been building certain facilities and also selection plants for the city of Mexico, biocarbonization for the management of organic fractions, and to see how it transforms into fuel. We also have nature-based solutions as it's the vegetation, where, just to set a couple of examples, we've been able to work with the farming producers of the city. Yes, I said the farming producers, that's what I said. The territory of the city of Mexico, more than half, it's still rural, even if some people may be surprised. In this rural area, we can see that we have communities that live there even before the Aztecs. They are millennial communities that live with corn, that they cultivate a corn and other types of products, and that we've been working with them to try to promote the local supply. And of course, not necessarily all the products come from far away, and that additionally it has a social benefit for the community. But besides that, we've also been working in the creation of marshes inside Mexico. In Mexico, we have, in winter, we have the ducks from the US and Canada. They love the city of Mexico, and this it had fallen because of the growth, and we've developed a marsh marshlands where every winter we have ducks and other series of winters to spend the winter there inside the city. And besides the creations of gardens where the insects that are a vital part of the ecosystem have been flourishing after having a time in which there had been a reduction in the population. That's why the city of Mexico, it's not just concrete and the buildings and the cars, they're also very important ecosystems that have started to flourish.
We also have another axis of work for the adaptation and resilience of urban areas. We work very closely with the civil protection area and all the areas regarding healthcare. For example, both early alerts, rainfall phenomena, or heat waves that civil protection provides to us, all the way to epidemiological vigilance. It, the humidity changes, and so the vectors and the diseases change. There is a surveillance of epidemics in the city, and we are aware of how all kinds of diseases are moving. Dengue, chikungunya, yellow fever, among others. But also other common diseases, or so to speak, common, such as gastrointestinal infections. We are also seeing how this affects or impacts air quality with changes of humidity and temperature. Of course, the factors that affect the quality of air change, and we are working very closely to monitor this, to develop a climate culture, and we have created a center for the environmental culture for climate change, where we work with children in schools and open population with the citizenship to spread knowledge about some environmental areas are important for the city to know. However, now I'm going to focus on two specific projects that I would like to talk to you about. Regarding mobility, we are working with the Metrobus, which is our VRT, our local transportation, but with dedicated road that has a collection service with a prepaid card. There are many lines in the city already working, on which have been that we have overlapped with the existing subway lines, and as well as the trolleybuses. This system has been converted into electric. Nowadays, we have a single one line, 100% with electric trucks, large and robust trucks for heavy work, as Mexico City would require. Whoever of you who have come here to Mexico City and have used our public transportation system, you will see that it is a robust system, and they are using electric system. And this is not only a technological challenge, because electrical vehicles exist, and transportation buses of heavy use also exist. The challenges are others. The main ones have been financial. I mean, this is to mean, how do we finance an electrical transportation system with very high cost increases, particularly due to battery costs? And we have found solutions for this. In the case of Metrobus, we have been working with the private sector very closely, because even though the Metrobus system is coordinated by a government regulated body, Metrobus itself, operators are private. So electrical vehicles, the vehicles in general, electrical or otherwise, need to contribute to inlets to the business, so that this can sustain itself financially, and so that the personnel can sign contracts, and they have retirement benefits. There are programs to renovate vehicles. So it is a very modern concept in a modern company that achieves financial sustainability, which also creates quality employment, which is key. Our society needs quality jobs. And this is a successful case of one where the union and coordination between the private sector and government manages to create companies such as this that work under a government body but with private funding. However, there are other challenges. If we want to use electric vehicles, we need to work with companies that deal with that. In Mexico, we have all kinds of uh, electric-based installation for facilities, and they are they were built in the first few years of the installation. The facilities come from the first years of the 20th century. So connecting hundreds of vehicles into a single facility is very difficult. Are part of the other is the collection of rainfall. We have areas that suffer for non-constant water service. Uh, so that the areas one day have water, the next they don't. So we have this rainfall collection system with over 60,000 rainfall collection devices, and right now we are installing 500 systems a week where families can recover or collect rainfall and store it. This is key because this program, besides the benefits of having the water resource and avoiding the emission of greenhouse gases due to avoiding water pumping, there is also a gender equity component because women are the ones who have generally or traditionally been in charge of water distribution and who have hours or time in their lives to wait for the vehicle that brings the water for the family, and they lose work or education opportunities. So it is very key from a gender perspective to have this activity where we have worked particularly with families headed by women, sorry, and trying to balance this because when facing climate change, social justice is necessary, and it's necessary for women to have equal opportunity to men and for all the population to improve its situation. So this program of rainfall collection and the transport program have a very strong gender component. In the transport case, we know that women move across the city differently from men. They they do more trips. They do shorter trips, as we found. They drop children at school. They go back to school. They buy food, back home, and then get the kids and so on. And all of this needs to be considered when planning transportation. We did that here, as well as the water collection system. We consider the activities that women have to carry out during the day, so it doesn't become another issue that they have to face, but an asset for their day. So they have one less responsibility, so that responsibilities are shared among the family. That is my presentation, my message. Thank you very much. Thank you, Oscar. That leaves us a good idea about the city and its challenges, and with concrete ideas to see other cities that may not be as advanced technologically, but they can see that the technology exists and it could be implemented, such as water collection. We love rainfall collection, and we know the Mexican example. I also want to thank you for mentioning some of the challenges, such as financial and interinstitutional coordination. That is at the base, that is going to be the base of our conversation later on. Now, we are moving on to a different area. We're talking about cities and the problems and solutions, which is very interesting. Now, we want to talk about a more regional vision. We're going to listen to very important projects, but now we have Andres Pica from Chile, who is, we need to contextualize this. Chile, as Mexico, Chile is aiming to be carbon neutral by 2050, such as Mexico City, and this implies that that 345 municipalities and 16 local governments will make climate commitments and will execute those plans. Within that framework, we thought it important to invite and speak project leader at Sustainable Solutions Group, who has been working with the Chilean government in the guide for climate action at the regional level in Chile. I give the floor to Andres so he can tell us what the guide is about and how it is being implemented by the government. Thank you for inviting me.
Eh, eh, bueno,
There we are.
muchas gracias por la invitación al BID.
Thank you for inviting me to the bank. This is a paper that we prepared for the Chilean government to create a guide for climate action in municipalities and regional governments. This paper came from a need due to the climate crisis that we have seen, particularly in this year. We have seen very many crises in the area due to climate change, and government is key for this action. The subnational governments are key. They are the first to feel the impact and the first to generate solutions. So Chile, in its framework law for climate change, Chile pushes regional governments and municipalities to create climate action plans in the next 2 years. This creates a great challenge because even though there are cities that are leading in the sector, there are also municipalities with low income, and these subjects create challenges that they don't know how to tackle. And it is the work of the bank and the Chilean government, particularly the Ministry of the Environment, to facilitate this fight. In this context, we launched this work, the Guide for Climate Action in Municipalities and Regional Governments, how to advance to carbon neutral territories and resilient to climate change. We did this work in conjunction with the municipalities and regional governments. Even if there is a review of case studies and international experience, we created workshops of local governments that provided information on what actions they were carrying out, what were the main problems they were facing, and how they how they solved some of these problems.
Identificamos cuáles eran las
In this context, we identified the needed climate transformations, which is a long-term vision, how to achieve carbon neutrality and resilience, which may be in the far future, but is necessary. It's the goal. And the climate actions, which are the specific actions that they will take to take us closer to the transformation. Then we also have the barriers and the facilitators and any other experience that they had that was relevant. We identified four climate risks, and for each of them, two necessary transformations to reach resilience. First, we have heat waves, then droughts, then forest fires, and then flooding both interior and at coasts, flooding by river and by sea. These risks, it was very good to see that many municipalities that are smaller and regional governments are taking action. I think that, for example, to face the heat wave, the Metropolitan Park of Santiago, they created two public areas to face heat, which include shaded walks, place areas where people can enter water or access water or pools to swim to fight off the heat. We had the Navidad municipality regarding drought. They created rainfall collection and management systems. We have the Araucanía Municipality Association, which created a model of municipal order to face forest fires. how do you create a common regulation for what we all face together, but facing a risk that will not respect the limits of a commune or a region? So we need to find ways to collaborate and face these challenges together. We also have the Pichilemu municipality created its commune regulator plan in areas where no housing can be built due to large wave volume. In another different area, we saw the transformation, the action to reach carbon neutral. We have 4 emission sectors for how energy is produced, whether it be electric or natural gas. And there we need to have energy that is free from fossil fuels, both in the ways to be completely energy positive and not to consume fossil fuel. In transport, we need to encourage the use of electric vehicles and active transportation, such as biking and walking. Private transport vehicles to also be turn electric and reduce transport demand. On woods and nature, restore the systems that have a large carbon content. On the agricultural and food sector, we need to modernize agriculture to reduce methane and nitrous oxide emissions, but also have the population adopt healthy food diet with a low carbon footprint. And regarding waste, we need to decrease the amount of waste generated, create differentiated waste reduction, waste collection systems, and valorize and revalue residue. Some of the actions taken by the government are in the Yungay municipality. They install lighting with photovoltaic and solar panels in schools. The change of wood heating in Chillán. In Santiago, there was a change of the bus fleet with over 2,000 electric buses, which is about a third of the total number in the city, and it's one of the cities in the world with the most electrical buses. The reforestation of La Pampa de Taramugal with native trees by the Tarapacá government. There is an solidarity eco markets program in Puerto Varas, Linares y Calama, which stop food waste. Food that cannot be sold, any food that cannot be sold is shared with the most vulnerable cities. That doesn't allow the food to be lost and help other people. La Pintana also has another project to create composting for over a decade.
¿Cuáles eran las claves del éxito para la acción climática? Y en ese sentido hay acciones que son transversales que no tienen que ver con una transformación específica, que es
There are
generar
things that are
keys to success for climate action.
that we can
You have
see
to
the
analyze
data,
the data of the target territory,
and we
improve the
need
management of soil
we need to
use,
work in governance and
lead with
okay,
example and
and
strengthen
many
governance,
times
collaborate, because people
okay, that's
may
why
not
we
have
have more private
the government may not have a
corporations.
lot
We
of
can
resources,
work
but they can
international
link
funds.
with
We can
other
work with
parts
other
of the government,
levels of governance, and also the participation. And we need to
educate the
educate
community
and
and train
also
them
about
with
the
both
municipal
municipal
teams, and
teams
also to work
as well as
with the
training from
training of,
other
also to
stakeholders
work with other stakeholders.
to
It's very
have
important for climate action to
successful
be
climate action.
successful. And
Some of the
also in the
facilitators
facilitators,
and
and
barriers,
we have
there was technical
the technical
competencies,
competences, and also the
processing
time of the
times, the available
procedures,
technology,
and
which
everything. We can see
sometimes
that in
in Latin
Latam,
America we
we
don't
don't
have
have
the
the
technology
possibility.
necessary, and we need to
Then that's
manage,
why
we
we
need
need
to do
to
process
work in
access
this,
to
and
them.
also the
We
private
need a
sector that
developed
it's
private
developed,
sector
and that have the competencies to
that can
work in these
all these
situations,
solutions, citizen
the
support,
political
political
the
will,
citizens
external financing,
support, and also external funding, and also other
and
elements
other elements
associated.
regarding regulation.
We can see
Sometimes
that the government,
governments,
depending on the national, depending on the
their power,
context, they don't have so many
don't have enough
competencies.
competencies.
And also there are other
There
principles
are other
that we
principles that we
identified
identify
to
to
see
measure
who
success.
was successful and that were taken by a
There
leadership,
was
and there
leadership,
was the logic of aligning and integrating everything that was done in a
and
climate
within a
change
logic of climate
logic
change,
to take
to see
advantage
the
of the
opportunities
opportunities to collaborate with
when there was
and
a
also
opportunity to
they have the
coordinate with the private
possibility
sector,
of
they took it.
inclusivity, not to leave
Okay.
anybody aside in this transformations, and they wanted to innovate, and they were transparent in the climate change, and that's why the important thing we needed this for this big challenge. And one of the main concerns the municipalities have is funding. And okay, we can see that the guidelines has the details of the different instruments that are part of the Chilean context, but also that are cross-sectional for the whole of Latam. And we can say that the municipalities have their own resources, that with a little bit of creativity that we can take, even generating savings. And okay, we have the opportunity to advance with regulations. There was a very interesting experience in Chile where we're trying to updating the plan. We can allow that certain buildings had one or two stories more if they had a first story that was open and with green areas to be able to face um, a heat island. So we also have funds of the central government that can help out, and that's why there are several initiatives. So where you can say in the case of Chile, and with the private, okay, there's a lot of space to and that we work with environmental assessments and also with carbon bonds. And we can see the private-public partnerships. What is something very interesting when we talk about Santiago is Santiago takes advantage that the public network it's a concession. That's why we can do this, that the buses are electric, and that as in the long term, the electric buses are cheaper because although they require higher investment, the operation cost is much lower. That's why if one encourages this with the demand in the concession, we can generate a transformation without the need of many. We can say that environmental donations by foundations is a very good opportunity. And that's why the municipalities need to create these projects so that they encourage and that they're ready to implement. And we can say within the contracts, okay, now today to work with solar panels or to change the fleet of the same municipality of the regional government, we can use contracts that allow the funding in 20 years or so. They can allow the funding of a solar panel in this way, or a solar roof, or a solar ceiling, and we generate savings from the first year instead of having to face the investment at the beginning. And as I said at the beginning, we have different opportunity and as well as and also they are also available and they are open to transform to fund the transformation. Okay, to finish off, we have some recommendations for the guideline. It's that we need to be ambitious. There is the need of taking urgent action, and we can't stop. We need to take action today and not just to stop. There are several options that are easy to implement that have benefits, and that we just can't stop in doing something perfect, and we can take an action today. And we need to have an inspired vision of the future and to add up the challenge. We need to be certain that to the future, if we face the transformation, we're going to have a better society. We're going to have better health. We're going to have more active cities, more connected, more integrating. And this is something that we need to take focus on. And although climate change, it's something that it's a threat, we can take this to create a better option. We need to work with the local action. It's very important to generate an alignment and to identify the barriers and resistance to change, and also to do this by these teams and to have a focus that the solutions that we generated, it's citizen-centered, that the community sees the benefits of all these transformations to take advantage of all the opportunities, because there's so many opportunities and we need to be agile. And this is an opportunity for the government. We need to generate these transformations and to improve the environment. And if we can't do everything, we are able to be reachable and that achieve a short-term impact, because that generates an impact to be able to move forward. And finally, because it's something that works out perfect, in the first opportunity, we need to keep on acting because this challenge is here to stay. And there are so many opportunities to generate a sustainable development, taking advantage of these opportunities. Thank you, Andres, for such a for the positive note that it's always so necessary for this type of conversations, a positive energy, and to keep on so that we're not so we don't and that's why this gives us an opportunity to keep on with our talk with Marcelina and Jenny. It helps us to see that we have Jenny Maher Santos, which is the works and that works in vision change. And hi, Jenny, and all. Hi, Jorgelina. Jorgelina, it's the general coordinator and the senior investigator for the Instituto de Medio Ambiente y Desarrollo for LATAM that has a headquarters in Buenos Aires. And okay, thank you so much for being here. And I think that everything has allowed us to the first question that I wanted to show Jorgelina. Both Oscar as Andres, and they say, okay, there are challenges. There are several kinds of challenges and all the projects and the region in terms of climate change and resilience. And what are these challenges and how are the local governments responding to be able to improve their adaptation? Okay, hi everybody, and thank you so much. The truth is that they were very interesting presentations, and I don't want to say things that have already been mentioned. And I had the possibility of getting some ideas because but thinking about, I wanted to mention something that it's very typical that I think that it's very important to take into account, basically in the challenges, because we all know what are the impacts that are happening in our cities. We already know what the problems are. And nowadays they talked about different examples of solutions. But there is something that I would like to highlight, something I would need to highlight. It's that in LATAM, more than 40% of the population lived in cities that had less than 300,000 inhabitants, and 50%, 54% in less than 1 million inhabitants. In general, what we know the best, or what it's known the best about our experiences in the big cities. And it happens a lot in cities of different sizes. There's so much innovation and experience, but sometimes it's not well registered. Therefore, the information of IPCC or different kinds of studies that what's not been published, what's not registered, it's not visible, it's not taken advantage of to be able to, we cannot share it. And with meetings like this, in which we have more than 700 people that are together, or each one will have different kinds of experience, there is, or at least that's how I say it, we can say that there is a huge demand to be able to know and to learn how to do the things, because there are diagnoses we need to know, but we need much more knowledge, we need much more experience to be able to see how we do this, to approach all the climate change, and that it's working in the traditional development, the infrastructure, access to services, etc., as well as risks that we saw different kinds of risks, and also climate change. Okay, therefore I wanted to highlight, and also there's a bit of how the climate agenda of city moves forward, and how to, and Caro already mentioned this, and many times the cities were pioneers, and that's why they're leaders in this topic, but also the discussions. And we can say that the funds get more and more national level, and that's why that interconnection. And we also, something that I would also like to share is that with this idea, we need to establish what is going to be part of with the climate actions, many things that are happening in the government, that the governments do. It's not something that is considered part of the climate change. It happens a lot. I was talking with different kinds of, and this was something that has been changing, and all these changes are accelerated. We have much more example. But some people say I'm not working in climate change, but we have been developing several infrastructure plans and for household improvements that were improving their situations, building resilience. That's why the idea is to be able to integrate the different actors within the cities to be able to have a much more integrated agenda, like the areas of climate change that were separated, and the other areas, it's from the other it's for the other areas, it's more complicated to be a part of this, and that's why I want to talk about the development of the capacities of the different areas to be able to understand.
Trabajando en la Ciudad de Buenos Aires.
Happening, we're in a project working in Ciudad Buenos Aires, where we are working with the housing institute that they didn't have to be, and how we're going to build this, because we can see how we can integrate this. But okay, we have these mechanisms that we can see that the agenda is much more integrated, and thinking a little bit about the informal and or the different kinds of settlements. And it's an area in which I'm working a lot, and we can see what's the challenge of the adaptation, how to build resilience, a little bit about the mitigation. And what we can see, it's that after we can see different funding agencies from their own countries, and we can see how in each part of the neighbors that are improving based on the building, the need to include the mitigation, and this, how do we go through how can we, so that we don't replicate the models to which the city it's growing, and where we are not going to be able to be able, and not to improve the emissions, and that's why we can see that there's less return. And okay, it's very important to see this needed to strengthen capacities, how the reference needs to understand how to invest, how to include climate change, how to include the ideas of mitigations, because they're giving solutions to multiple problems that there are, and not necessarily are they competing for the urgent needs that they may have, and for the improvement of the households. How can we do all this? All these improvements, taking into account all the needs for adaptation and mitigation to climate change. And I think, okay, and especially you're right that in mitigations we need to change that citizen, and so that it's sustainable. Not only the city has to change as well as the citizen, and I can say that your focus and the development of the capacities, we have intermediate societies or biggest societies that still don't identify that or that are, and we have, okay, the question for Jenny, because Jenny, the topic of capacities, all the works in the cities, we know that everything it's very different, and some of them have Department of Climate Change, others don't, and others there's no coordination between the people that think and the ones that execute projects. And we can say that the Chilean plan, it's very ambitious. What Andres told us of the guideline that I think that it's very interesting, and there were like, we have so many municipalities that need to do a climate action, and climate change actions. How can you ensure that these municipalities with different kinds can be able to do these plans and then execute them? Okay, thank you so much to be able to talk about this topic that it's always very interested, especially in the region when, as you can say, with the different kind of capacities. In the case of Chile, thanks to the law, the climate change law, we need to do this coordination between the tools that we have at the local level and also at the local level in the different municipalities. In the topic of to see how we coordinate all this, it's something that because, as you can say, we have different already have this advanced, and that's why we need to help. We need to help the municipalities to identify things that they're already doing within their management, and this is also associated to actions that turn to adapt to climate change, or that also tend to mitigation. That's the first step, to help them to identify things that the things that already doing can be part of a plan. And the second thing, it's this topic, it's to find the coherence with instruments at the other direction, and with the law requests that the regional plans are connected to the national plans for mitigation, but also we also have community plans, although the law doesn't request to do a specific regulation for the plans. We do have a specific regulation for the elaboration of, and in this way, we wanted to have this topic of giving alignment for the communal plans. We also have the guideline that has been so very important to be able to help these municipalities to be able to identify and at the same time to define. And also we plan from the environmental ministry and also from the municipal certification that it's an area to keep on working and to keep on including the variables within the certification. They have a collaboration and they have communications with very big communities that manage all kinds of resources, and even small ones that are even isolated. And that's why as part of this, that we have this map of stakeholders and municipalities, we can help them to define everything according to their needs. This on one side. And the second thing, it's that the municipalities are the ones that face the direct impact of what is happening in of the episodes that we have and that are explained by climate change. And we can say that in this winter, for example, in Chile, we have floodings. We had a lot of flooding in the summer. We also had forest fires that were able to eat up a lot of hectares. And also, and it's the topic of the management, although it can be done, we can see the implementation has to be at the local level. It has to be because of the municipality. That's why these municipalities are coordinated with the other plans and that are included in their own plans. For example, the management of disasters. This is something that it's relevant because these are the extreme events are more frequent and are going to be part of the planning of the country in the future.
En el entendido que tienen todo un sistema para apoyar
I understand that you have a whole system to manage the generation of these plans. You have technical assistance as well, which is key. What are the main things and opportunities that you see to go from planning to action? That's the question. A hard one. And I think that we agree with all countries in the region that the main challenge is resources. besides technical capabilities, mainly resources. It is hard to ask for implementation when sometimes in the territories have other priorities, such as overcoming poverty and inequities that that make climate change go to the background, so to speak. In particular, and climate change itself is itself viewed as a problem that is at an entirely different scale, too macro. So to bring down the idea of the problem and to identify the key impacts at the micro level is one of the largest challenges that we have besides getting the necessary resources to take action. Implementation is always going to relate to, obviously, the availability of resources, but incorporating measures intended to adapt to climate change as well as to mitigate it have to be within the framework within the planning of the general management. We cannot wait or we expect to always have fresh resources and to have a project to come help, but they have to be incorporated into the planning, whether territorial or national, and to consider the use of resources in territories. That is the greatest challenge. To take that capacity and talk to authorities at the local level, and I assume that it happens everywhere because they are people who are chosen by the population itself. It's not that they are getting a central government mandate, but they need to talk because they can manage in their own territory and address the people directly, and the people need to understand and interiorize what are the measures that they need to carry out and how to better manage resources.
Gracias, Jenny. María Camila, te debe aparecer, tengo tiempo para una pregunta más para las chicas
Maria Camila,
de los
we have time for another question from the public. One. All right, for you girls.
Gracias, es súper interesante todo lo que estamos diciendo y quisiera hacer
This is this is interesting and one last question to you both.
Ojalá para terminar en algún tipo de nota positiva. ¿Cómo ven el futuro de la
To end
planificación
on a positive note, how do you see the planning of climate planning in the region, and what are the key opportunities that you have identified?
Dale, Jorge.
Can I start? All right. Yes, Georgelina. The only or the best road that I see is what Jenny was talking about. We have the priority of structural issues and poverty that Latin America has not overcome yet, to which we can add the climate crisis now. I think it's key that there is no road possible if there is no closely coordinated work between the government and the city and all the technical areas and the political decision makers with the community. One leg alone can go far. We need everyone, we need both legs or all legs to be moving in sync and all groups to understand what the problem is and to generate and build the adequate solutions for their own areas. When I was talking to that, and I saw that the government may propose a measure and the citizens themselves say, no, I don't care, no, we don't want this, and 4 to 5 years later, you see that the measure implemented because it was a good one, or that the government intended to fulfill a particular project and they didn't have the time to do that and to introduce the innovations such as the use of nature-based solutions or rethinking the housing prototypes or several items, that the time is not enough due to the tightness of the time frames. There's no time to think about alternatives, and I believe that in those dialogues, those dialogues can arise and create better practices. And we see in the region how that happens, how many more cities, more and more places are starting to develop actions that are far more aligned with all that we have discussed. So the key is to raise awareness among all of us about the need to be the need to exchange within the network. I think this is very helpful to open people's minds to be transformed and exchange more knowledge to build things together. So I think active participation is the key and is the basis without which nothing else can advance. There's no more time to expand, but that is the bullet point. Thank you, Yorelina. For me, I think that some of the opportunities that we have, or some of the things that we can consider looking forward at the local level, in other countries, we are developing the climate policy. So the main opportunity we have is to consider the stakeholders from now, from the beginning, not to think, not to think in a paternalistic way of telling them what you have to do in the future, but to incorporate them in the planning from now. That may could be a great opportunity to prepare policies, looking at the scientific evidence that we have, which is pretty extensive, and we have enough knowledge so as to properly understand the phenomena we are facing, as well as to use or the community's willingness to participate. Although certain sectors of the population are still reticent to see this kind of issue of area as an opportunity or a priority, as I mentioned before, there's another sector, the youth, that is that has the spirit to solve things, to give things the weight that they deserve, and to this problem in particular. So if we work with them, it would be a great opportunity, not just to raise awareness, but to involve them in decision making and to design policies that are more collaborative from the start. I have a very hopeful vision that with all the evidence that we have, the topic is going to become more and more important, and we are going to understand the relationships between territorial planning and what happens with transportation, as well as mobility within cities. We're going to be able to design even more, even more better to face the different challenges in the region. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you all for this super interesting session. Now, Maria Camila, I give the floor to you. I'm sorry, we had a lot of specific questions for the cities and the projects. We will forward them to you because we cannot answer them right now. So, Maria Camila, the floor is yours. Thank you, Caro. Remember that presentations are shared in the chat for anybody to access them. The conversation was very interesting today. I want to thank you all for joining us, and particularly to our great speakers who joined us today. It was great to listen to Beatriz talk about the Promorar in Recife to requalify for urban requalification and resilience for people with affected by climate change. The climate change, it started in 2022, as Beatriz mentioned, and we have to act today to face these challenges and what they imply for us all. We were also inspired to see nature-based solutions, in some cases, or gray solutions that allow to face those changes, always aiming to reinforce the link between climate change with the proposals to be implemented and to look for governance measures that can be implemented for each in this case. Also to thank Oscar Vasquez to share with us today and talking about the challenges facing Mexico City, as well as the goals proposed to 2030 and 2050 for the city. The transversal gender and equity subjects that you take into consideration in their planning, which are very relevant for our audience. Thank you, Andres Pica, for sharing with us the guide for climate actions for municipalities and regional governments in Chile that aims to empower mayors and governments and their teams to further plan and implement climate actions in their territories, to take their communities toward a resilient, sustainable, and low carbon development. For people who provided questions, the guide will be published, or was published actually, on September 12th. And lastly, I want to thank Jenny Maguer for sharing with us how Chile has promoted the implementation of climate action across all levels of the states. To Georgelina Hardoy for giving us a broad view of the challenges facing cities in spite of climate planning. And lastly, to Carolina for moderating this panel and the organization team without whom this would not be possible. Thank you all for joining us in these 3 weeks. We're going to meet next week, but before we go, one question for the Mentimeter to close. Based on what we discussed today, tell us one action that you think
para
you could
hacerle
implement in
frente
your
al cambio
city,
climático. De todo lo que oímos hoy,
you could implement in your city to
el
face
intercambio
climate
tan
change.
interesante que tuvimos,
Based on everything and in the conversation that we had, mention one key action that you think can take place in your city to face climate change. There you have the Mentimeter to scan or put the code
viendo los resultados.
and answer to see the answers. Something that was useful.
Algo importante es que la guía no se ha publicado
The guide has not been, will be published on the 26th, next Tuesday, before the next webinar.
Bueno, muy interesantes las ideas.
Very good ideas you're posting that many of us have come up after this conversation. And to end, we have the assessment that is useful for us to continue improving our webinar, because which shows us that webinars are useful for our work, for your analysis. So there you have a question. So for you to rate your satisfaction with the different aspects of the conversation, please rate it.
Darles las gracias de nuevo.
So once again, thank you all, and see you next week for the next conversation on climate change. Thank you all. Thank you very much. Have a nice day or evening.